Have you ever felt the weight of family expectations, only to find yourself caught between duty and happiness? In this heartfelt story, we delve into the life of a woman who faced exactly that, caring for a stubborn father-in-law while her own family life slowly unraveled. What her husband eventually revealed, and how she turned things around, will leave you both shocked and inspired. Watch until the end to discover the unexpected twist that transformed their lives and the powerful lesson it holds for all of us. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you liked this video. Your support helps me continue to share these valuable lessons. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you do so and turn on the bell notification so you don't miss any videos. If you enjoy this story, please comment number 1 below. If not, comment number 0 so I can improve future videos for you. Now let's get started. In their youth, my father-in-law and mother-in-law were dedicated village teachers, devoting their lives to educating the children in their small rural community. When they eventually retired, they spent the first 6 months enjoying a peaceful routine at home, savoring the slower pace of life. They found joy in simple tasks, like raising chicks together, which brought them closer in their shared domestic life. Their combined monthly pension, totaling over 10,000 yuan, was more than enough to cover their daily expenses, allowing them to live comfortably in the countryside. Despite the contentment they found in this rural existence, my mother-in-law often mused about never having lived in a city, a dream she had quietly harbored throughout her life. One day she shared her thoughts with my father-in-law, expressing her desire to move to the county town to enjoy a different lifestyle in their later years. My father-in-law, who had always cherished his wife and supported her decisions, agreed wholeheartedly, understanding how much this new experience meant to her. With the help of relatives, they soon purchased a modest second-hand house in the county town, a modest 60-square-meter abode. Their new chapter began with excitement and hope. After settling in, they quickly adapted to the rhythm of city life, filling their days with activities that brought them joy and companionship. Mornings were spent at the local mahjong parlor, where they played for hours with newfound friends. Afternoons were reserved for rest in the comfort of their new home, and evenings were spent joining other seniors in the park for lively square dancing. Their days flowed with a leisurely grace, filled with simple pleasures and the joy of being together. Just as they were beginning to savor the tranquility and fulfillment of their later years, fate took a cruel turn. Without warning, a sudden disaster struck, disrupting the peaceful life they had worked so hard to build. In the second year after moving to the city, my father-in-law and mother-in-law went to a nearby mall to buy clothes. While crossing the street, my mother-in-law couldn't dodge in time and was hit by a truck. She was rushed to the hospital and underwent emergency care for over 2 hours, but, unfortunately, they couldn't save her. My mother-in-law's unexpected passing dealt a huge blow to my father-in-law, leaving him utterly despondent and with a somewhat dazed expression. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had 3 sons, with my husband being the eldest. My husband hadn't excelled in academics and relied on farming to make a living, while the other 2 sons attended university and stayed in the provincial capital for work after graduation. The 3 brothers discussed how they couldn't let their elderly father continue living alone, and decided to let him choose one of their homes to spend his later years. However, my father-in-law, a man of strong will and deep-rooted independence, insisted on living by himself, saying, "I'll live by myself. I won't go to any of your homes." Even in his old age, he held firmly to his autonomy, resisting any notion of becoming a burden to his children. My husband, the middle son, gently tried to reason with him, saying, "Dad, we only want to make sure you're well taken care of. If you live alone, there will be no one around to help you if something happens. As your sons, we can't help but worry about you. Please just choose one of our homes where you'll be comfortable and we'll know you're safe." But my father-in-law, with a determined look in his eyes, responded, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm still healthy enough to take care of myself. I don't want to disrupt anyone's life. I'll stay in my own home where I belong. If you all can visit me during the holidays, that's enough for me. I don't need anything more." Despite his father's stubborn resistance, my husband couldn't fully accept his decision. His love and concern for his father's well-being outweighed any frustration. He made regular trips back to his father's house, checking in on him and making sure he was all right. Each visit was met with the same firm but affectionate tone. "You don't need to keep coming back here. Go home and focus on your family and your work. I have everything I need right here. Don't waste your time worrying about me." My husband, though often met with this stern demeanor, never let it dissuade him. He would smile and reply, "Dad, I'm just here to see how you're doing. If everything's good, then I'll head back." He always brought something with him, a meal, some fruit, or groceries. But his father would invariably refuse them, insisting, "I don't need any of this. Take it back with you. My pantry is full. I'm not lacking anything here." This routine continued, a dance of love and independence where both my husband and his father expressed their care for one another in their ways, neither willing to fully concede, but both understanding the deep bond that connected them. Later, the family had a serious discussion about the ongoing situation, realizing that it couldn't continue as it was. My husband, sensing the strain it was causing, said, "Dad, our family is the least well off, but why don't you just come and live with us? We can manage somehow." The other two brothers quickly agreed, saying, "Yes, brother. You bring Dad to your place. We won't interfere or create any issues." After thoughtful consideration, the three brothers concluded that since my husband lived in the same area as their father and had easy access to transportation, it would be most practical for him to take on the responsibility of caring for their aging father. Eventually, after much persuasion, my father-in-law reluctantly agreed to the arrangement and moved into our home. However, life didn't get any easier after that. My father-in-law, despite agreeing to live with us, remained stubborn and difficult to please. No matter what we did to accommodate him, he was never satisfied, and the tension in the house grew heavier by the day. The once peaceful atmosphere in our home became oppressive, and it felt as though we were walking on eggshells around him. If it hadn't been for my deep commitment to my husband and our marriage, I honestly wouldn't have wanted my father-in-law to live with us. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know. Thank you for your valuable time. The burden of this arrangement quickly became apparent. Since the day my father-in-law moved in, he hasn't contributed a single penny toward household expenses. He stopped paying for rent, water, electricity, and gas, leaving us to shoulder the entire financial burden. Every essential item, from rice to oil to salt, fell on my shoulders, and the weight of these responsibilities became increasingly overwhelming. Despite our best efforts, nothing seemed to satisfy him, and the strain on our marriage and family life was immense. My father-in-law adhered to a strict routine, eating meals at precisely the same times and retiring to bed at the same hour every night, all while taking no part in any household chores. His behavior extended beyond mere routine. He had a notably short temper and an unwavering refusal to listen to any advice or suggestions from either my husband or me. One particular incident highlighted his stubborn nature vividly. My son, eager to assist and show respect, brought a glass of water to his grandfather. He approached with genuine intent, hoping to help. However, when he handed the glass to my father-in-law, the old man didn't even glance at him. With a sharp, dismissive tone, he said, "I didn't ask you to pour water. Are you just being redundant?" My son, taken aback and hurt by the unkind remark, stood there in stunned silence, unsure of how to respond. The look of disappointment and confusion on his face was heart-wrenching for me, filling me with profound sadness. In an attempt to address this ongoing issue, my husband had several earnest conversations with his father, hoping to bridge the gap and encourage a more considerate demeanor. Despite his efforts, the old man's attitude remained unchanged. His stubbornness and lack of empathy continued to create a strained and painful environment, leaving both my husband and me feeling helpless and disheartened. From that day forward, my feelings toward my father-in-law underwent a profound shift. I found myself grappling with an indescribable sense of discomfort and frustration that colored my interactions with him. His stubbornness, once a trait I might have been more sympathetic to, now seemed like a personal affront, deepening the chasm between us. I became increasingly distant and less patient, which did not go unnoticed by my father-in-law. In turn, he grew more antagonistic and uncooperative, exacerbating the tension and creating an atmosphere of mutual discontent. This uneasy dynamic persisted for several months, and the atmosphere at home grew increasingly strained. The awkwardness between us was palpable, lingering in every interaction, making even simple conversations feel like a challenge. Eventually, my husband decided to take our son away for a few days, leaving me alone with my father-in-law. This arrangement, meant to provide a brief respite, instead intensified the discomfort. Without my husband's calming influence and mediation, the situation with my father-in-law became even more trying. His unwillingness to cooperate with me only heightened my sense of isolation and frustration. Feeling overwhelmed and unsure of how to navigate the situation, I reached out to my brother-in-law for help. I asked if he could take my father-in-law to his home for a few days, providing a temporary escape from the strained environment. I hoped this arrangement would give us both a break and allow things to settle before my husband returned. My brother-in-law agreed to the plan, and I arranged for my father-in-law to spend some time away, hoping it would offer a reprieve from the tension and give us all a chance to regroup. My brother-in-law agreed to help and came over the very next day to assist with the move. However, when he arrived, he found that my father-in-law was unwilling to leave his current residence. He insisted on waiting until my husband returned before he would consider moving. With no other option available, my brother-in-law had to leave without accomplishing the task. When my husband got back, I explained the situation to him. To my relief, he didn't blame me for the inconvenience. Instead, he asked me to be more patient with his father. Despite his supportive words, I couldn't shake off the feeling of discomfort. The atmosphere at home was increasingly strained, and I found the situation exhausting. Although my husband didn't express his frustration overtly, the constant tension and the additional responsibilities I had to shoulder left me feeling overwhelmed and worn out. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain a semblance of normalcy in our home, and I struggled to find any respite from the mounting stress. One day, feeling overwhelmed by the situation, I decided it was time for a candid discussion with my husband. We sat down for a heart-to-heart talk, and I shared my feelings openly. I said, "Honey, I don't want to continue living with your father. It's become too difficult for me. What if I take our child and we move out?" My husband's face darkened, a clear sign of his distress, and he remained silent, leaving me uncertain about his thoughts. The following day, my husband took it upon himself to have a conversation with my father-in-law. Although I wasn't privy to the details of their discussion, I could sense a change in the air. A few days later, my father-in-law approached us with a surprising decision. He wanted to move in with my brother-in-law. This development was a tremendous relief for me, and I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. With my father-in-law's departure, the atmosphere in our home transformed. The tension that had once been a constant presence began to dissipate, and the environment became noticeably more relaxed. However, this newfound calm also led to unexpected changes in my relationship with my husband. I found myself increasingly irritable with him, reacting with frustration even over minor issues. It felt as though nothing he did could satisfy me, and my demeanor towards him grew colder. As time passed, my husband's patience seemed to wear thin, and he began to respond with less tolerance to my growing dissatisfaction. This shift created a widening gap between us, making our interactions more strained and our relationship more tense. The harmony I had hoped for seemed elusive, and the emotional distance between us continued to grow. One day, out of the blue, my husband turned to me and said, "Wife, do you think this situation has benefited anyone? You always seem to think others are wronging you, but you haven't done anything for me or our child. I'm not finding much joy in life, and it feels like you don't want me to be happy either." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was stunned and suddenly confronted with a painful truth. He was right. I realized that since my father-in-law had moved into our home, I had been harboring a deep-seated resentment that I hadn't fully understood or acknowledged. This bitterness had been growing, and as much as I tried to blame external circumstances, I had become increasingly dissatisfied with my husband. The moment of clarity was jarring. It dawned on me that my discontent wasn't solely about external factors or recent upheavals. My unhappiness was also a reflection of how I had been approaching my marriage and family life. The departure of my father-in-law didn't magically fix everything. My dissatisfaction with my husband remained, and it became clear that I needed to address my attitudes and behaviors. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. With this realization, I embarked on a journey of introspection, questioning my role in the tensions that had arisen. Determined to foster change, I began adjusting my mindset and focused on expressing more care and affection toward my husband and child. Gradually, I noticed positive shifts in our relationship. The atmosphere at home grew warmer, reminiscent of the early days of our marriage. Disagreements still occurred, but they were resolved more swiftly, and our love and understanding deepened. As my feelings of dissatisfaction and resentment diminished, I found myself appreciating life more fully. Joy returned to our family dynamics, lifting the weight that had once clouded my view. My husband became more considerate, and our home evolved into a haven of harmony and love. Over time, a remarkable change unfolded in my father-in-law's demeanor. The coldness that once defined our interactions softened, replaced by a newfound warmth and concern. He began to call occasionally, checking on how things were at home, signaling his willingness to mend our strained relationship. This shift prompted me to reflect on the deeper essence of life and relationships. I realized that a fulfilling life is rooted in mutual care and understanding. Life, in its essence, is simpler than we often perceive. True contentment emerges when we release rigid stances and focus less on personal gains or losses. Embracing empathy allows us to forge deeper, more meaningful connections with those around us. By cherishing and nurturing our relationships, we cultivate a life filled with happiness and harmony. This journey has taught me that living well involves not just accepting others, but actively engaging with them in a spirit of compassion and understanding. As we conclude this story, I hope it has offered you a fresh perspective on the challenges and rewards of family relationships. What lesson resonated with you, and how do you plan to apply it in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more stories and insights that inspire and uplift.